Welcome to day 17. We stand here today after two of the most critical days of this entire journey. Day 15, we built the architecture of belief, the internal scaffold of who you are. Day 16, we engineered the fortress of focus, the external environment that dictates your inevitable success. Now you have the mindset and you have the system, you have done the work and you are executing the blueprint flawlessly. And yet you look at your results, you look at the spreadsheet, you look at the scale, or you look at the savings account and you see something that confuses you, something that shakes the very foundation of the belief you just built. You see a plateau, you see a straight, flat, unmoving line of results, even though your effort is a steep uphill climb. This is the great disillusionment. This is the point where the world separates the amateurs from the champions, because the amateur believes that progress is a straight line, a clean, steady, incremental climb where 2 units of effort always equals 2 units of reward. The champion, however, understands the brutal, uncompromising truth of nonlinear progress, that the world does not reward effort on your timeline. It rewards effort on its own exponential timeline. The most common mistake you will make, the reason 99% of people quit, is simply because they fundamentally misunderstand the physics of effort. They mistake an invisible period of compounding for a period of failure. And today we tear down that myth and teach you how to master the long game. The first step in mastering nonlinear progress is accepting the reality of the latent potential period. Think of a massive block of ice. You want to melt this ice, so you begin heating it. You stand there for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you measure the temperature. It goes from minus 10 degrees Celsius to minus 8 to minus 5 to 0. Then you keep heating it. You pour energy into it for another hour. The temperature reads 0, and it reads 0 again and again. The ice is still solid. The amateur says, the system is broken. My effort is being wasted. I quit. But the scientist knows that during this period, something profound is happening that your current metrics cannot measure. The energy you are pouring in is not being wasted. It is being used to break the molecular bonds of the solid ice. It is converting potential energy into kinetic energy. It is doing the invisible work necessary for the phase transition. That is the latent potential period. In your life, this is the time when you are building the connections, accumulating knowledge, strengthening the tendons, rewriting the neural pathways, and deepening the roots of your discipline. You are operating at 80% of the effort required for a breakthrough, and that 80% yields a visible 0% result. The world says you are not moving on. The champion says, I am accumulating. You are accumulating momentum, accumulating knowledge, and accumulating an irreversible identity that will make the inevitable breakthrough not just possible, but inevitable. When you finally hit that tipping point, when the molecular bonds finally snap, your progress doesn't go up by 2 units. It goes up by 20, 50, or 100 units in a single sudden exponential surge. The difference between the person who quits at minute 59 and the person who breaks through at minute 60 is not effort. It is simply patience and understanding the nature of the climb. This invisible work is what separates the long-term builders from the short-term sprinters. The sprinter measures visible distance, and when they hit the plateau where the external environment resists them, they panic and change direction. They switch from writing to coding, from coding to investing, and back again, never staying long enough for the latent potential period to reach fruition. The marathon runner, the true champion, measures consistency and discipline. They know the reward is not linear, it is exponential. Think about compound interest. In the first year, your interest is a pathetic fraction of your principal. You barely notice it. You might even think the system is slow, but you do not quit because the mathematical model proves the process is working. You trust the compound curve. In fact, the most valuable part of the compound curve is always the last percent, the part that only comes after the longest periods of accumulation. The champion's mindset during the plateau is not one of doubt, but one of quiet confidence. They are standing at the 99th degree, knowing that the temperature is about to shift, and they simply need to maintain the heat. The discipline you engineered on day 16 is designed precisely for this moment. The fortress is not built to help you when you're motivated. It's built to keep you working when the scoreboard reads 0, because the system is designed to run you even when your emotional energy is exhausted. You must now treat your consistency not as a means to an end, but as a sacred end in itself. The ritual of showing up and executing the task is the victory regardless of the output's current numerical value. The output is merely a lagging indicator of the process you built days, weeks, or months ago. Trust the process, not the present measurement. But nonlinear progress has a cruel twin brother, and his name is the dip. The dip is the unavoidable, sudden, brutal moment of maximum resistance that occurs right before the exponential leap. If the plateau is the period where your results are flat, the dip is the period where your results actually regress. You are running faster, but you feel slower. You are eating cleaner, but the weight scale jumps up 2 pounds. You are studying more, but you fail the minor test. The dip is designed by the universe to test the depth of your conviction. It is the ultimate filtering mechanism. The moment when the system applies maximum pressure to see if the belief you built on day 15 is truly load-bearing steel or just flimsy drywall. This moment of regression is where 99% of people throw in the towel. Why? Because it attacks the logic of their effort. If I am doing less and I am failing, that makes sense. But when I am doing more and I am failing worse, the logical mind screams, this path is fundamentally wrong. Abandon ship. The human mind is designed to seek immediate proportional reward, and the dip is the ultimate psychological warfare against that instinct. It creates an emotional debt that far outweighs the numerical failure. The dip is not a sign that you should quit. The dip is the signal that you are doing the right thing, that you are forcing a change so profound that the old environment, the old you, is applying its final desperate resistance before it shatters. The champion treats the dip not as a setback, but as a clearing mechanism. Think of an athlete pushing past their personal best. The moment before they break the record, their muscles scream, they hit the wall, and their body tells them to stop, or they might break. The champion does not stop. They use that pain, that resistance, as irrefutable evidence that they are at the threshold of their current capability. The dip is proof that you have hit a boundary, and the only way to move is to push through it, not to retreat from it. If you quit, that resistance was wasted. And the next time you try, you'll have to climb the hill all over again. If you push through, you not only break the record, but you move the baseline of what is possible for you. Your entire universe expands. You must develop a profound and almost paradoxical mental state during this time. Detached aggression. You remain aggressive in your execution. You maintain the discipline. You execute the habit stacking. You live within the fortress day 16, but you remain completely detached from the results. You acknowledge the regression. You note the failure, but you do not allow it to redefine your identity. The failure is merely data, a temporary measurement, not a permanent diagnosis of your ability. You are not defined by the one bad day in the dip. You are defined by the unwavering commitment to the system you designed. So how do we survive the long stretches of the plateau and the sudden shock of the dip? We move from large macro measurement to small micro measurement during the latent potential period, looking at the macro scoreboard. The total income, the total weight loss is demoralizing because it's flat. You must change what you measure. You start measuring process metrics. Did I execute the ZTZ flawlessly this morning? Did I maintain the buffer zone protocol between meetings? Did I enforce the sensory engineering of my workspace? These micro measurements are things you have 100% control over. And when the external results are stagnant, these internal measurements give you the small, crucial psychological wins necessary to keep the engine running. The victory is in the daily adherence to the ritual, not the daily increase in the outcome. You are essentially creating a parallel scorecard where you always win provided you show up. And the consistent accumulation of these micro victories is the invisible heat that is breaking the molecular bonds of the ice. The plateau is not a period of waiting. It is a period of perfecting the process. If you are executing flawlessly and the results are still flat, you have a design flaw in the system, not a character flaw in yourself. This is where the power of the feedback loop comes in. The champion does not treat the system as sacred and unchangeable. They treat the goal as sacred and the system as fluid, disposable, and constantly adaptable. The plateau is your signal to stop executing blindly and start analyzing ruthlessly. This is the time to audit your fortress. Where is the friction still too high? Where is the digital decontamination failing? Which social contact is still creating drag? You stop asking, am I working hard enough? And start asking, is this the most effective path? It is a time for minor surgical adjustments, not major philosophical overhauls. If you were running 10 miles a day and your speed has plateaued, you don't quit running. You analyze your diet, your sleep, your form, your shoes. You find the limiting factor in the process and surgically remove it while maintaining the consistent 10-mile execution. You are optimizing the engine during the journey, not pulling over and abandoning the car. The plateau is the ultimate laboratory for efficiency. You are getting free, high-quality data on the weak points of your current design. You must be curious, not defeated. And what about the days when the dip is so steep, so crushing, that the idea of execution feels impossible? I want to give you one rule, perhaps the single most important rule for long-term consistency, and it is the 2-day rule. You are going to fail. You are going to have a bad day. You are going to miss the workout, eat the entire pizza, or spend the ZTZ scrolling on your phone. That single failure is a data point, an exception, not a new rule. At the moment that failure becomes 2 consecutive failures, you have created a new destructive pattern that is much harder to break than the first failure was to commit, never miss twice. If you have to do 1 push-up, do 1 push-up. If you have to read 1 sentence, read 1 sentence. If you have to write 1 word, write 1 word. The goal on the second day is not massive output. The goal is to protect the chain of your identity. It is a psychological win that tells your subconscious, we failed yesterday, but we are not the type of person who allows failure to define our future. This micro execution resets the 2-day chain and prevents the dip from becoming a permanent slide back into mediocrity. You must protect the chain at all costs. Even if the execution is pitifully small, the quality of the effort is less important than the psychological victory of showing up. The true test of your discipline is not how you perform on your best days, but how you manage your momentum on your worst days. The champion understands the strategic necessity of active rest. When the dip hits, the amateur stops completely, collapses, and waits for motivation to magically return. The champion engages in active rest. This is a strategic pivot to tasks that replenish your energy but still contribute to your larger objective. If you are mentally exhausted, you don't binge watch TV, you pivot to a less cognitively demanding task that still advances the mission, organizing the fortress, planning the next week's meal prep, reading an inspirational biography. Active rest is controlled deceleration, not uncontrolled collapse. You maintain the forward trajectory. Even if it's at 1 mile per hour, you are managing your energy reserves, not depleting them entirely. The ability to strategically deploy rest without forfeiting the identity of a high performer is the hallmark of a system designed for a lifetime, not just a weekend burst of motivation. Now let's talk about the specific emotional terrain you'll navigate during this time, because the plateau is not just an external objective measurement. It is a deeply personal internal battle with your inner critic. This critic sits on your shoulder and whispers a specific insidious lie. It doesn't say you're not good enough. That's too crude. It says your effort is futile. It argues with the logic of your consistency. You look at the flat line and the critic says, see, I told you so. You've wasted 30 days. A smart person would cut their losses and try something new. This is the point where you must use the architecture of belief, day 15, as a defensive shield. Your belief system must be stronger than the data you are currently observing. You have to understand the inherent time lag in any system of true depth. You don't plant a redwood tree and measure its height the next day. The most important work, the root system, is happening underground out of sight for years. That is your life right now. You are growing a root system strong enough to support an exponential future. The discomfort you feel is the roots pushing against the hard, unyielding earth. It's necessary friction and it is proof of life. Trust the roots. And this brings us to what professionals call the gap between taste and talent, or in our case, the gap between vision and execution. You have a clear vision of day 100. You see the finished physique, the completed manuscript, the six-figure business. Your taste, your vision is impeccable, but your current execution, your current result is not there yet. That gap, that brutal, visible distance between where you are and where you know you should be is the breeding ground for the inner critic. The amateur is crushed by this gap. They believe that their taste must immediately equal their talent. The champion, however, treats the gap as fuel. The fact that you can see the destination so clearly proves you have the cognitive map. You just lack the accrued time and effort in the current moment. You use the frustration, the discomfort of the gap, not to quit, but to intensify your focus on the process metrics. The daily rituals, you shrink the focus to the next 5 minutes, the next single task. If you focus only on the destination, you quit. If you focus only on the next step, you survive the plateau and close the gap. This small strategic contraction of your timeline is your most powerful psychological tool. It's your ability to manage the overwhelming vastness of the long game. Now, let's talk strategy for those moments when the dip is prolonged, when life throws not just a single failure, but a series of catastrophic setbacks, injury, illness, financial emergency. In these periods, maintaining the full 100% effort of your system is unrealistic, and attempting it leads to burnout, which is a structural failure. The wise champion does not crash the system. They engage the concept of the minimum effective dose. The minimum effective dose is the smallest amount of effort required to sustain momentum and identity. It is the line between progress and regression. If your goal is to write 1,000 words a day and you hit a wall of exhaustion, the minimum effective dose might be writing a single coherent paragraph or even just an outline for the next chapter. If your goal is an hour in the gym, the mid might be 5 minutes of stretching and light movement. The key is that the mid is designed to preserve the habit chain, the 2-day rule, and prevent the 0-day. 0 days are toxic because they violate the core identity of the person you are becoming. Me days are heroic because they reaffirm the identity under extreme duress. They are small acts of defiance against the chaos of the dip. They are the equivalent of a submarine running on emergency power. You are not sprinting, but you are not sinking. You are holding the line, conserving resources, waiting for the external environment to become favorable again. This strategic retreat is not weakness. It is the ultimate resilience. The amateur sees the minimum effective dose as cheating. They think, if I can't do the full thing, I might as well do nothing. The champion sees the me as the firewall protecting the entire system. They understand that maintaining a non-zero status is 10 times more valuable than the output of that single day. The compounding effect works in reverse too. A 0 day doesn't just subtract the output of that day. It adds the psychological friction required to restart the habit on the next day. That friction, that activation energy, day 16, is what kills momentum. By executing the me, you maintain a state of low friction readiness. When the storm passes, when the pressure subsides, you don't have to claw your way out of the abyss. You simply ramp up the dosage again seamlessly because the habit was never truly broken. The discipline built during the plateau is now paying dividends in your ability to survive the dip with minimal damage. You are turning a catastrophic setback into a controlled tactical pause. Remember the ice block analogy. All of this work, the fortress, the belief, the resilience through the dip, the strategic rest, it is all heat being absorbed by that block of ice. You are now standing at 99.9 degrees Celsius. The difference between 99.9 and 100 is almost immeasurably small in temperature, but it is the difference between solid and liquid, between latent potential and visible surging growth. When you hit that escape velocity moment, day 16, the sudden surge of results, your critics will say you got lucky. They won't see the years you spent accumulating heat during the plateau. They won't see the dark moments you pushed through the dip. They won't see the hundreds of days you deployed the minimum effective dose just to hold the line. But you will know that the luck was simply the intersection of massive sustained preparation meeting a tiny window of opportunity, and that intersection, that sudden shift from linear to exponential reward, will redefine your entire life. Your progress is not broken, it is simply accumulating. But now, we must address the crisis of identity that the plateau manufactures, because the flat line doesn't just challenge your effort, it challenges who you believe you are. For 30 days, you have been defining yourself by a new set of actions. I am a writer, I am an athlete, I am an entrepreneur. But when the results don't show up, when the external mirror is blank, the old, comfortable self begins to fight back. This is the true meaning of resistance. It is the internal conflict between your current measured results and your aspirational identity. The old self whispers, you are pretending, you are an imposter, you are a fraud trying to wear a costume that doesn't fit. The way you resolve this crisis is not by achieving a breakthrough, but by radically shifting your focus away from the outcome and onto the internal scorecard of character. Your identity during the plateau must become, I am the person who does the work regardless of the reward. That is your new immovable foundation. You are proving to yourself daily through the micro measurements that your character is defined by the process, not the paycheck. During this critical internal phase, the most lethal habit is seeking external validation. When the flat line hits, the ego desperately craves a hit of dopamine, a quick fix to prove its worth. You find yourself posting to social media, looking for affirmation, sharing minor accomplishments, or seeking praise from friends. These are acts of self-sabotage, because every time you outsource your validation to an external source, a like, a comment, a word of praise, you teach your brain that the process itself is not the reward. You spend energy that should be going into the latent potential of the ice block, and you convert it into immediate, cheap, external energy. Short circuits, the exponential curve. The champion closes the door and pulls the curtain. They understand that the period of maximum accumulation requires maximum privacy. The only person who needs to see the work is you. The only scoreboard that matters is your process metrics. You must become radically self-contained, trusting that the only validation that matters is the quiet, internal knowledge that you executed the non-negotiable protocol flawlessly. Let the results speak later. Let the critics gasp later. Your work right now is internal, and this internal work requires you to conquer the ultimate enemy of the plateau, boredom. True mastery is fundamentally unexciting. It is the 1,000th repetition of the same boring scale on the piano. It is the 100th cold call that yields nothing. It is the 15th revision of a document that looks exactly the same as the 10th. The champion recognizes that excitement is the enemy of consistency. The thrill and novelty of starting a new project or an easy task is addictive, and when that novelty fades, the amateur quits, mistaking boredom for failure. But boredom is actually the signal of entry into the deepest work. It means your neural pathways are moving from conscious, effortful execution to subconscious, automatic skill. The lack of stimulating novelty means your brain is finally quiet enough to build the underlying architecture of mastery. You must not run from the tedious, repetitive work of the plateau. You must embrace the mundane. You must make peace with the dull rhythm of high-quality, continuous execution. The fortress of focus you built on day 16 is your sanctuary from distraction, but it is also the crucible of consistency. It forces you to sit down with the boredom and find the deep, quiet satisfaction of perfect repetition. But there is an even deeper level of measurement that precedes the external breakthrough. It is the level of unmasked metrics when the visible output is zero and you're tired of measuring only process. You must turn inward and measure the subtle qualitative shifts in your execution. Are you recovering faster between sessions? Is the internal self-talk quieter during high-stress moments? Has the task that once required 100% mental focus dropped to 70%, freeing up cognitive bandwidth? You are not measuring the distance traveled, but the internal friction reduced. You may not be faster, but the run feels easier, requiring less will and less internal resistance. You may not be richer, but the financial decision that once caused anxiety is now calm and immediate. These micro shifts in ease, speed, and mental quietude are the true leading indicators. They are the invisible internal evidence that the latent potential is building up, that the new identity is settling in, and that the foundation is hardening. The champion becomes an expert at sensing this internal ease long before the world notices the result. The only thing stronger than the desire for reward is the commitment to a silent contract. This is the contract you sign, not with the world, but with your future self. The present version of you, the one who is tired and tempted to quit, does not owe effort to himself. He owes it to the person he is meticulously building on day 100. That future self is depending on the consistency you deploy right now. When the plateau screams for you to rest, you perform the minimum effective dose, not because it feels good, but because you are upholding a sacred promise to the man you are becoming. This is an act of intertemporal discipline, a quiet compassion directed across time. Every single ritual you execute is the signature on that contract, reaffirming your commitment to a future you cannot yet see, but which you believe in with the certainty of day 15. The moment you feel the urge to quit, you are simply attempting to break a contract with a version of yourself who will regret your cowardice. Protect the contract at all costs. Now, word of caution about the moment of breakthrough. It contains the seeds of a profound structural failure known as the relapse mechanism. The ultimate test is not surviving the dip. The ultimate test is surviving success. The amateur hits the escape velocity moment, the exponential leap, and immediately relaxes. They believe they have earned a break. Their guard drops and the fortress walls crumble. They violate the 2-day rule by taking a week off to celebrate. But the system you built is not designed to stop. It is designed to run and iterate. The sudden reward triggers a biological response for rest, but the disciplined mind recognizes this as the moment of greatest vulnerability. The champion's reaction to a massive win is not relaxation, but immediate recalibration. You don't take a week off. You immediately seek the next plateau by hardening the system. You increase the minimum effective dose. You reduce the buffer zone, or you introduce a new slightly higher standard for the ZTZ. You use the momentum of the win to immediately raise the baseline of your identity, ensuring that the breakthrough becomes the new immutable floor, not a temporary peak before a crash. This constant upward pressure is the true signature of mastery, and that brings us to the final definition of the champion. The champion is the eternal student. Mastery is not the state of knowing everything or achieving a final perfect endpoint. Mastery is the willingness to remain a beginner at progressively higher levels of difficulty. Every time you leap from one plateau to the next, you instantly become a beginner again. Only this time, the altitude is higher, the air is thinner, and the problems are more complex. You must approach this new level with the same humility, curiosity, and commitment to the mundane process metrics that you deployed on day one. The plateau is not a wall. It is a waiting room for the next level of challenge. Embrace the boredom, honor the contract, trust the qualitative shifts, and know that your reward is not the sudden surge of results, but the quiet, undeniable identity of the person who simply does not quit. Go forth and maintain the heat on the ice. The heat is on, the bonds are snapping, and the system is infallible. Your only remaining task is to remain standing at 99.9 degrees.